My wife told the 911 operator, "He's faking," while I was having a stroke. The recording went viral. She lost her job in 48 hours. I was 41 years old when half my face stopped working during a Saturday morning in our kitchen. Vanessa was making her protein smoothie with the expensive blender she'd bought after her promotion, the one that cost more than our monthly grocery budget. I'd been reaching for the coffee pot when my left arm went numb and dropped to my side like dead weight. The mug I'd been holding shattered against the tile floor, and I heard myself trying to say her name, but the word came out slurred and wrong, like my tongue had forgotten how language worked. She turned around with the blender still running and looked at me with this expression I'd seen 1,000 times before, the one that said I was interrupting something important. The left side of my face felt strange and heavy, like someone had injected Novocaine into half my skull. I tried to tell her something was wrong, but my mouth wouldn't form the words correctly. She hit the button on the blender, and the kitchen went quiet, except for the sound of my breathing, which had gotten loud and raspy without me noticing. "Can you not be dramatic right now? I have a conference call in 20 minutes and I need to prep." She said it the same way she'd say it when I mentioned being tired after working a double shift at the warehouse, or when I'd asked if we could talk about why she'd been staying late at the office 6 nights a week. I raised my right hand to my face and felt the left side drooping, my mouth pulled down at an angle that didn't match the other side. I managed to get out the word help, but it sounded more like hep, and she rolled her eyes in that particular way that made me feel small and stupid. "You're fine. You probably slept wrong on your neck again." She poured her smoothie into her travel mug and started scrolling through her phone, already moving on to whatever crisis was happening at her marketing firm. I tried to take a step toward her, and my left leg buckled, sending me crashing against the kitchen counter. The impact knocked over the fruit bowl, and apples rolled across the floor in every direction. That got her attention, but not the way I needed it to. She looked up from her phone with annoyance rather than concern, like I was a child who'd made a mess on purpose. Vanessa set her phone down on the counter with that careful precision she used when she was trying to control her temper. "Are you drunk? Did you start drinking this morning?" The accusation hit me harder than the counter had, because she knew I'd been sober for 6 years, knew about the meetings I still attended every Tuesday evening at the community center, knew that I'd worked too hard to throw it away. I shook my head, or tried to, but the movement felt wrong and made the room tilt sideways. My vision was starting to blur at the edges, and there was a pressure building behind my eyes that felt like my skull was too small for my brain. She picked up her phone again and started typing, her thumbs moving fast across the screen while I stood there with half my body refusing to work. "I need to call," I managed to say, the words coming out thick and distorted. "Call who? Your sponsor?" She didn't even look up from her phone. "This is exactly why I can't deal with your drama anymore. Every time I have something important going on, you find a way to make it about you." The kitchen was starting to spin now, a slow rotation that made my stomach lurch. I grabbed for the counter with my right hand, the only one that still worked, and knocked over her travel mug. Green smoothie spread across the white quartz countertop she'd insisted we install during the renovation last year, the one that cost $8,000 and nearly emptied our savings. She looked at the mess, and something shifted in her expression, anger replacing the annoyance. "That's real mature." She grabbed a dish towel and started wiping up the smoothie with aggressive strokes. "You know how much that cost? You know how many hours I worked to pay for this kitchen?" Every word came out sharp and clipped, her voice rising with each sentence. I tried to tell her this wasn't about the smoothie or the counter or her conference call, tried to make her understand that something was seriously wrong inside my body, but my mouth had stopped cooperating entirely. The sounds coming out weren't words anymore, just garbled noises that made her shake her head in disgust. She threw the towel into the sink and pulled out her phone again, but this time she wasn't texting. "I'm calling 911 because clearly you need professional help." She said it like she was doing me a favor, like she was the reasonable one being forced to deal with an unreasonable situation. My legs gave out completely, and I slid down the cabinet to the floor, ending up in a sitting position with my back against the dishwasher. The tile was cold against my legs, and I could feel the wet smoothie soaking into my pajama pants. She stood over me with the phone to her ear, tapping her foot impatiently while she waited for someone to answer. From down here, she looked impossibly tall and far away, like I was looking at her through the wrong end of a telescope. The kitchen lights were too bright, and I had to close my eyes against them. I heard her give our address to the operator, her voice crisp and professional like she was ordering lunch at a business meeting. "My husband is having some kind of episode. I don't know what's wrong with him, but he's being dramatic and won't communicate properly." There was a pause while the operator said something I couldn't hear. "No, I don't think he's in actual danger. He does this sometimes when he wants attention. Another pause. Longer this time. She sighed heavily, the sound full of exasperation. He's sitting on the floor, making noises. His face looks weird, but he's always been able to control his expressions when he wants to manipulate a situation. The operator must have asked something specific, because Vanessa looked down at me with cold assessment in her eyes. No, he's breathing fine. He's probably faking to get out of his shift at work today. Another pause. Yes, I know how serious stroke symptoms are. I work in healthcare marketing. I know what a real medical emergency looks like, and this isn't it. She said it with such confidence, such absolute certainty that she was right and everyone else was overreacting. The operator said something that made Vanessa's jaw tighten. Fine. Send an ambulance if you need to cover yourselves legally, but I'm telling you he's putting on a performance. She ended the call and looked down at me with something close to contempt. Happy now? You've got your attention, and I'm going to be late for my call. She stepped over me to get to the sink and started washing her hands like I was something dirty she'd had to touch. The water running sounded unnaturally loud in my ears, and I wondered if that was part of whatever was happening to my brain. Through the kitchen window, I could see our neighbor putting out his garbage cans, living a normal Saturday morning while my world was falling apart on the kitchen floor. Vanessa dried her hands on a clean towel and checked her reflection in the window, smoothing down her hair and adjusting her collar. She'd gotten her hair cut shorter last week without telling me, had come home with 6 inches gone and acted like I was crazy for noticing she looked different. The ambulance is probably going to take 20 minutes in weekend traffic. She said it like she was commenting on the weather, detached and clinical. I'm going to take my call upstairs in the office. Try not to make a scene when they get here. She picked up her laptop bag from where it sat on the breakfast bar and headed for the stairs without looking back. I heard her heels clicking on the hardwood, then the sound of the office door closing on the second floor. The house went quiet, except for the refrigerator humming and my own labored breathing. I was alone on the kitchen floor with half my body not working and a wife who thought I was faking, and somewhere in the distant part of my brain that could still think clearly, I knew something fundamental had broken between us long before this morning. I tried to focus on breathing and staying conscious while I waited. The smoothie had dried sticky on my pants, and the broken mug pieces were scattered around me like evidence of something I couldn't quite remember. My left arm was completely useless now, just weight attached to my shoulder, and when I tried to move my fingers, nothing happened. The numbness had spread up my neck and into my jaw, making it feel like my face belonged to someone else. Time did something strange while I sat there, stretching and compressing in ways that didn't make sense. It could have been 5 minutes or 30 before I heard sirens getting closer, the sound cutting through the morning quiet of our subdivision. The doorbell rang and I tried to call out, but no sound came. I heard footsteps above me, Vanessa moving around in the office, but she didn't come down. The doorbell rang again, more insistent this time. Then I heard voices outside and the sound of the side gate opening. We'd given the code to our house cleaner, and apparently emergency services could access it too. The back door opened and 2 paramedics came through, a man and a woman in Navy uniforms with equipment bags slung over their shoulders. The woman dropped to her knees beside me immediately, while the man called out asking if anyone else was home. She had kind eyes and gentle hands as she took my pulse and looked at my face with professional assessment. "Sir, I'm Kelly. Can you tell me your name?" I tried to say David, but it came out as garbled nonsense. She nodded like she'd expected that and pulled a penlight from her pocket. "I'm going to check your pupils, okay?" The light was bright even through my closed eyelids, and I heard her tell her partner something about unequal dilation and probable stroke. She asked me to squeeze her hands, and I could only squeeze with my right. "Can you smile for me?" I tried, but felt only half my face move. She was already pulling out equipment and calling for something when I heard Vanessa's heels on the stairs. The male paramedic, whose name tag said Foster, turned toward the sound. "Are you his wife?" He kept his voice professional, but I caught an edge of something in it, maybe disapproval. Vanessa appeared in the doorway looking annoyed at the interruption, her phone still in her hand. "Yes, he does this for attention sometimes." I told the operator that when I called. Kelly looked up from where she was taking my blood pressure, and her expression went carefully neutral in a way that told me she'd heard a lot and was choosing not to react. "Ma'am, your husband is displaying classic stroke symptoms. We need to get him to the hospital immediately." Vanessa crossed her arms and leaned against the door frame like they were discussing weekend plans instead of a medical emergency. "How long have symptoms been present?" Foster was pulling out a stretcher from somewhere and Kelly was putting an oxygen mask over my face. "I don't know. Maybe 20 minutes? He was fine. and then he started acting weird. Kelly and Foster exchanged a look I couldn't quite read. 20 minutes is still within the treatment window. We need to move fast. They worked with practiced efficiency, getting me onto the stretcher and strapping me down. Vanessa watched from the doorway without moving to help or coming closer. "Ma'am, you'll want to follow us to Memorial Hospital." Kelly's voice had gone cold and clipped. "We're taking him to the stroke center. Will you be riding with us or driving separately?" "I'll drive separately." Vanessa checked her phone again. "I need to reschedule my call first. This is really inconvenient timing." Foster stopped what he was doing and stared at her with undisguised shock on his face. "Your husband is having a stroke." Kelly put a hand on his arm in warning, but didn't disagree with the reaction. They wheeled me through the back door and around the side of the house to where the ambulance waited in our driveway, with lights still flashing. I could see neighbors standing on their porches watching, Mrs. Chen from 3 houses down with her phone out like she was recording. Foster opened the back doors, and they lifted the stretcher inside with smooth, coordinated movements. Kelly climbed in with me while Foster went around to the driver's seat. She adjusted the oxygen and started an IV in my right arm with quick, capable hands. "You're doing great. We're going to take good care of you." The engine started, and I felt the ambulance pull away from the curb. Through the small window in the back door, I could see Vanessa still standing in the driveway with her phone to her ear, not even watching us leave. Kelly was doing something with the IV bag and talking into a radio clipped to her shoulder, giving information to whoever was waiting at the hospital. Blood pressure 190/110. Left-sided weakness and facial drooping, pupils unequal, patient unable to speak coherently. Last known well time approximately 23 minutes ago. The ambulance swayed as we took a corner, and Kelly braced herself against the wall without breaking rhythm. She was still on the radio when I heard her say something that made my blood run colder than it already was. Partner stated patient is faking for attention. I repeat, partner believes this is not a genuine medical emergency despite clear neurological deficits. There was static, and then a voice came back asking her to confirm. Kelly looked at me with something like pity in her eyes. Confirmed. Partner showed no concern and stated she needed to reschedule a work call before following to hospital. More static, and then the voice said something about documenting everything and contacting social services. The rest of the ambulance ride blurred together into sensations without clear memories. The siren wailing above us. Kelly's voice staying calm and steady as she monitored my vitals. The fluorescent lights inside the ambulance making everything look artificial and strange. At some point, I felt the vehicle slow and then stop, heard the back doors open and felt fresh air on my face. Multiple voices surrounded me as they pulled the stretcher out and started wheeling me through automatic doors. The ceiling changed from sky to acoustic tiles, and the light went from natural to harsh fluorescent. Someone was asking Kelly questions, and she was answering in that same professional clip. Clinical details about blood pressure and oxygen saturation and stroke scale scores. They pushed me into a room that smelled like antiseptic and fear. A doctor appeared, a black woman with silver streaks in her hair and steady hands that moved across my body checking responses. "I'm Dr. Okafor. David, if you can hear me and understand, blink twice." I blinked twice. "Good. You're at Memorial Hospital and we're going to help you." She was doing the same tests Kelly had done, checking my grip and my smile and my pupils. She asked someone to page neurology stat and call for an immediate CT scan. Her voice had an accent I couldn't place, something musical underneath the medical terminology. "Where's his wife? Someone should be getting consent for treatment. She's not here yet." Kelly had followed us into the room and was giving report to a nurse who was typing everything into a computer. The doctor's eyebrows went up, but she didn't comment. "We'll proceed under implied consent. Get him to CT now. Every minute we delay increases the damage." They were moving again, rolling me down corridors that all looked the same, through doors that whooshed open automatically. The CT scanner was a massive white machine that looked like something from a science fiction movie. They slid me onto the narrow table and told me to stay still. The machine hummed and clicked around me while I stared at the ceiling and tried not to think about brain cells dying with each passing second. Back in the emergency bay, Dr. Okafor was standing next to a computer screen showing images of my brain in cross-section. I could see her frowning at whatever she was looking at. Large vessel occlusion in the middle cerebral artery. He's a candidate for thrombectomy, but we need to move within the next hour. She was talking to someone on the phone, her voice urgent but controlled. "Yes, I understand he needs consent, but his wife isn't answering her phone. Someone tried calling 3 times while we were in CT. Can we proceed with 2-physician consent?" There was a pause while she listened. "Thank you. I'll document everything. Dr. Okafor came over to my bedside and put her hand on my shoulder, the first gentle touch I'd felt since Kelly in the ambulance. David, you have a blood clot in your brain. We can remove it, but we need to do surgery very soon. The longer we wait, the more brain tissue dies. I'm going to have another doctor sign off on consent since we can't reach your wife. Blink twice if you understand and agree to treatment. I blinked twice so hard my eyelids hurt. She squeezed my shoulder. You're going to be okay. We're going to fix this. But even as she said it, I saw something flicker across her face that looked like anger, and I knew it wasn't directed at me. They were prepping me for surgery when Vanessa finally arrived, nearly an hour after the ambulance had left our house. I heard her voice in the hallway before I saw her, demanding to know why no one had called her with updates. Kelly's voice answered, calm, but with steel underneath. Ma'am, we called your number 7 times. You didn't answer. Vanessa appeared in the doorway of my bay, looking irritated, her makeup perfect, and her clothes unwrinkled like she'd taken time to change. Where is everyone? Why isn't anyone telling me what's happening? A nurse I didn't recognize stepped forward with a clipboard. Your husband is being prepped for emergency surgery to remove a blood clot from his brain. We attempted to reach you for consent, but couldn't make contact, Dr. Okafor explained. Vanessa's face went through several expressions in quick succession: surprise, confusion, and then something that might have been fear, but it passed too quickly to be sure. Surgery? For what? He was fine this morning. Dr. Okafor's expression could have frozen water. Your husband had a major stroke. He has left-sided paralysis and aphasia. If we don't operate in the next 30 minutes, the damage will be permanent and potentially fatal. The prognosis is still uncertain even with intervention. Vanessa stared at the doctor like she was speaking a foreign language, but he was just being dramatic. He does this when he wants attention. The room went completely silent. Every person in scrubs stopped what they were doing and looked at Vanessa with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. Dr. Okafor's voice when she spoke could have cut glass. Mrs. Davis, your husband has had a massive stroke. This is not drama or attention-seeking. This is a life-threatening medical emergency that required immediate intervention. If the paramedics had delayed even 15 more minutes, we wouldn't be having this conversation because your husband would likely be dead or permanently disabled. Vanessa's face flushed red, and she opened her mouth to argue, but Foster appeared in the doorway behind her. He had his phone out, and his expression was grim. Ma'am, I need to inform you that the 911 call you made this morning is public record. Someone has already requested it under Freedom of Information and posted it online. Your employer has been tagged in multiple social media posts. Vanessa turned to look at him, and I saw her face go pale under her makeup. What are you talking about? Foster held up his phone so she could see the screen. The recording of you telling the operator your husband was faking has been shared over 50,000 times in the last hour. People are calling your office. The blood drained from Vanessa's face completely now. That's private. You can't just release that. Foster's expression didn't change. 911 calls are public record in this state. Anyone can request them. And given the circumstances, several people did. Kelly stepped forward, her voice professional but with an edge I hadn't heard before. Mrs. Davis, your husband needs surgery now. We need you to sign consent forms, and then we need you to leave so we can work. Vanessa looked around the room at all the faces staring at her with varying degrees of contempt, and something crumbled in her composure. She grabbed the clipboard and signed without reading, her hand shaking for the first time since this morning. They wheeled me toward the operating room while Vanessa stood in the hallway with Foster's phone in her hand, staring at the screen with growing horror. The last thing I saw before they pushed through the surgical suite doors was her sinking into a chair with her head in her hands, and I felt nothing except relief that I was finally being taken seriously. The surgery was something I experienced in fragments, masked faces above me, bright lights, the smell of disinfectant, voices counting backwards, and then nothing. When I woke up, the world came back in pieces that didn't quite fit together at first. Beeping machines, soft lighting, a pressure on my left side that felt wrong. My mouth was dry and tasted like metal and chemicals. I tried to turn my head and felt a hand on my arm, gentle pressure keeping me still. Easy, David. You're in recovery. Don't try to move yet. The voice belonged to a nurse whose face gradually came into focus, a young Asian woman with her hair pulled back and tired eyes that looked kind anyway. The surgery went well. Dr. Okafor removed the clot. You're going to be okay, but you need to rest now. I tried to ask about Vanessa, but my mouth still wasn't working right. The nurse seemed to understand anyway. Your wife went home a few hours ago. She left her number at the desk if we need to contact her. The next few days existed in a haze of medication and therapy, and medical professionals rotating through with clipboards and questions. Physical therapists working my left side, trying to coax movement back into muscles that had forgotten how to fire. Speech therapists having me repeat sounds and words, rebuilding the pathways between thought and language. Occupational therapists teaching me how to dress myself one-handed while my left arm hung useless at my side. Dr. Okafor checked on me twice a day, always professional but with an underlying warmth that made me feel less alone. You're making good progress. The fact that you're regaining any movement this quickly is encouraging. Vanessa visited once, on the third day. She appeared in the doorway of my room looking uncertain, an expression I'd never seen on her before. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail, and she wasn't wearing makeup, which was so unusual I almost didn't recognize her. "Hey," her voice was small and tentative. "How are you feeling?" I tried to answer, but the words came out slurred and wrong. She flinched like I'd hit her. "The speech therapist says it'll get better with practice." I nodded, the movement still feeling clumsy and uncoordinated. She stood in the doorway, not coming closer, her arms wrapped around herself like she was cold, despite the warm hospital air. "I need to tell you something." She wouldn't meet my eyes. The 911 recording went viral, like millions of views viral. My boss called me into his office on Monday morning. I tried to explain, but he said the company couldn't be associated with someone who showed that kind of judgment in a medical emergency. They fired me. She finally looked up, and I saw her eyes were red like she'd been crying. "I lost my job because of a 30-second phone call where I was trying to help you." The words hung in the air between us, and I felt something cold settle in my chest. Even now, even after everything, she was making this about her inconvenience rather than my stroke. "The hospital administrator wants to talk to you about what happened." Vanessa shifted her weight from foot to foot. "They're asking questions about my behavior, and the paramedics documented everything. I didn't know they could do that. The neuropsychologist came by while you were sleeping and left her card. I think they're building some kind of case." She said it like I was responsible for people paying attention to how she'd acted, like their documentation was a betrayal, rather than proper medical procedure. I wanted to tell her to leave, but my mouth wouldn't form the words fast enough. She must have seen something in my expression, though, because she took a step back toward the door. "I should go. You need rest." She turned to leave and then paused, looking back over her shoulder. "The house feels really empty without you." It wasn't an apology or an acknowledgement of what she'd done. It was just another statement of her own experience, her own feelings, with no space for mine. She left, and I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of 6 years of marriage settling on my chest like something physical. A marriage where I'd been sober and stable and working doubles to cover her expensive tastes. A marriage where she'd climbed the corporate ladder while I supported her dreams and put mine on hold. A marriage that had been dying slowly while I'd been too busy surviving to notice. My phone started buzzing on the bedside table the next morning. Someone had charged it and left it within reach of my working hand. I picked it up awkwardly and saw dozens of notifications from numbers I didn't recognize, from social media apps I rarely used, from news outlets and podcasts and advocacy groups. The 911 recording had done more than go viral. It had become a cultural moment. People were using it to talk about how we dismiss medical emergencies, about how we treat people who are vulnerable, about the difference between performance and genuine crisis. Someone had started a hashtag about believing people when they say they're in pain. I scrolled through with my right thumb, reading comments from strangers who were angry on my behalf, from other stroke survivors sharing their stories, from people in healthcare talking about how often they saw partners dismiss serious symptoms. Someone had found Vanessa's LinkedIn profile and her company's social media accounts. The comments there were brutal and specific, calling out her behavior, demanding accountability, questioning how someone in healthcare marketing could show such poor judgment. Her company had released a statement saying they don't comment on personnel matters, but take all concerns seriously, corporate speak for admitting they'd fired her without admitting anything. A reporter from the local news showed up on day 5, a woman in her 30s with sharp eyes and a voice recorder. "Mr. Davis, I'd like to talk to you about what happened with the 911 call. A lot of people are following your story." I shook my head, the movement getting smoother with practice. She respected it immediately, putting away the recorder. "I understand, but if you ever want to share your side, here's my card." She left it on the table and walked out without pushing, and I appreciated that more than I could have expressed, even if my words were working properly. I looked at the card later, at the station logo and the phone number printed in raised letters, and wondered what my side even was. Dr. Bao Okafor discharged me after 2 weeks with a thick folder of follow-up appointments and therapy schedules. You've made remarkable progress, but you're not done recovering. Brain healing takes time, sometimes months or years. Don't push yourself too hard, but don't give up either. She handed me prescriptions and referrals and her own business card with her cell number written on the back. If you need anything or have concerns, call me directly. Don't wait, and don't let anyone tell you you're being dramatic. She said that last part with particular emphasis, and I knew she'd heard about the 911 call, knew she understood exactly what I'd be going home to. Vanessa picked me up in her car, the expensive SUV she'd leased last year over my protests about the payment. She helped me into the passenger seat with careful hands that felt impersonal. Like I was a stranger, she was assisting out of obligation. The drive home was silent, except for the radio playing soft rock at low volume. She pulled into our driveway, and the house looked exactly the same as it had 2 weeks ago. Nothing about the exterior suggesting that everything inside had fundamentally changed. She came around to help me out, and I waved her off, managing it myself with clumsy determination. My left leg was working better but still dragged slightly, giving me a limp that the physical therapist said might be permanent. Inside, the kitchen had been cleaned. No trace of the broken mug or spilled smoothie, or the morning I'd spent on the floor waiting for help. Vanessa had even replaced the fruit bowl. She'd put a hospital bed in the den downstairs because I couldn't manage the stairs yet, had set up a small table with my medications organized in a daily pill organizer. Look, I got everything ready for you. She gestured around the room like she was showing off a hotel suite. The visiting nurse will come 3 times a week, and I'll be home since I'm not working right now. We can make this work. She said it with false brightness that made my stomach hurt. I sat on the edge of the hospital bed and looked at the room that used to be where we watched movies together, back when we still did things together. Now it was a medical space, sterile and functional, with my wife acting like a nurse who resented her patient. Vanessa hovered in the doorway. Are you hungry? I can make you something. I shook my head. The speech therapist had said my words would come back gradually, but they still felt clumsy and thick in my mouth. Not hungry. The 2 words came out clearer than they had in days. She nodded like I'd given her permission to leave and disappeared into the kitchen. I heard her on the phone a moment later, her voice low and urgent, talking to someone about job applications and references. The visiting nurse arrived the next morning, a cheerful woman in her 50s named Paula, who smelled like lavender and moved with efficient competence. Let's see how you're doing. She took my vitals and checked my incision site and asked questions about pain levels and mobility. How's your support system at home? Is your wife helping with your care? I hesitated and she caught it immediately. Her expression softened. It's okay to tell me the truth. I'm here to help you, not judge your situation. Vanessa appeared in the doorway before I could answer, her smile bright and artificial. He's doing great. We're managing fine. Paula looked between us with practiced assessment. Good to hear. I'll be back Wednesday to check on you again. She packed up her supplies and left me her card with instructions to call if I needed anything before the next visit. After she left, Vanessa went upstairs to take a call from a recruiter, and I sat in the den listening to her voice drift down through the floorboards. She was explaining her sudden unemployment, spinning a story about company restructuring and her position being eliminated, not mentioning the 911 call or the viral recording or the reality that she'd been fired for cause. The lies came so easily to her that I wondered how many she'd told me over the years. My brother called that afternoon. David, holy shit. I just saw the news story. Mom sent me the link. Are you okay? Why didn't you tell anyone what happened? Leo's voice was tight with concern, and I felt something loosen in my chest at hearing him. Couldn't talk. Still hard. The words came out slow, but clearer than before. Where's Vanessa? Is she taking care of you? I didn't answer right away, and he caught the silence. David, is she taking care of you? I heard him moving around, papers rustling. I'm coming up this weekend. Don't argue with me. The protective older brother tone he'd used since we were kids. Friday evening, Leo showed up with his wife Jennifer and enough groceries to feed us for a month. He took one look at the hospital bed in the den, and his jaw tightened. Where's your wife? Why are you stuck down here alone? Vanessa came down the stairs with her laptop, wearing yoga pants and a hoodie, looking nothing like the polished executive she'd been 2 weeks ago. Leo, Jennifer, this is unexpected. Her voice was cool and controlled, but I saw her hands tighten on the laptop. Leo set the grocery bags on the kitchen counter with more force than necessary. We're here to check on my brother since apparently no one thought to tell his family he had a stroke. We thought it was best not to worry everyone until we knew more. Vanessa set her laptop on the breakfast bar. He's recovering well. The doctors are pleased with his progress. Leo looked at her with undisguised contempt. I heard the 911 recording. Everyone's heard the 911 recording. You told the operator he was faking while he was having a stroke. Vanessa's face flushed. That was taken out of context. I was trying to get him help. You were trying to get him help by telling emergency services he was faking for attention? Leo's voice rose. While he was literally having a stroke? Jennifer put a hand on his arm in warning but didn't disagree. I think you should leave. Vanessa crossed her arms. This is my house too, and I don't need to be attacked in my own home. Leo pulled out his phone and held it up. Do you know what people are saying online? Do you know that advocacy groups are using your call as an example of medical gaslighting? That stroke survivors are sharing their stories about partners who didn't believe them? You're famous now, just not the way you wanted to be. Vanessa grabbed her laptop and her purse. I don't have to listen to this. She stormed out through the front door, and we heard her car start in the driveway. Leo waited until the sound faded before turning to me. Pack your stuff. You're not staying here. But before I could respond, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen, and his expression changed. David, you need to see this. He pulled up a news website and showed me the headline. Local woman fired after 911 call goes viral. Company cites values mismatch. Below it was a photo of Vanessa leaving her office building with a box of belongings, her face set in angry lines. The article detailed the recording, her dismissal, and included a statement from her former employer about their commitment to healthcare advocacy and compassion. Someone had found her old social media posts, screenshots showing her complaining about sensitive co-workers and people who couldn't handle workplace pressure. The story was spreading across platforms, being picked up by bigger outlets, turning into something larger than just one woman's bad judgment. It was becoming a conversation about how we treat medical emergencies, about believing people in crisis, about the difference between drama and genuine need. The comments section was thousands deep, people sharing their own stories of being dismissed, of partners or family members who didn't believe them, of medical professionals who took them seriously when their loved ones wouldn't. Someone had started a fundraiser for my medical bills without my knowledge. It had raised $40,000 in 3 days. Leo helped me pack while Jennifer made dinner in the kitchen. We're taking you home with us. You can stay in the guest room, and Jennifer's mom is a retired PT who can work with you. You need people who actually give a shit about whether you live or die. I didn't argue because he was right, and because I was tired of pretending Vanessa's behavior was acceptable. We loaded my things into their car while the sun set behind the houses, painting the sky orange and pink. I took one last look at the house I'd lived in for 4 years, the house Vanessa had insisted we buy, even though it stretched our budget, and felt nothing except relief at leaving. Vanessa called 17 times over the next week. I didn't answer. She sent texts that started apologetic and grew increasingly angry. You can't just leave without talking to me. This is my house too. You're making me look bad by staying with your brother. Each message revealed more about how she saw the situation, more about how she thought she was the victim here. Leo finally responded for me, a single text that said, David needs space and will contact you when he's ready. She didn't respond, but the calls stopped. Jennifer's mother Ruth came by daily to work with me, gentle exercises to rebuild strength, encouragement when I got frustrated, celebration when I managed something new. The speech therapy continued with twice-weekly appointments at a clinic near Leo's house. My words were coming back faster now, still sometimes slurred when I was tired but mostly comprehensible. The therapist said I was making excellent progress, that the early intervention had saved function I might have lost permanently. During one session, she asked if I'd considered talking to the media about my experience. A lot of people want to hear from you. Your story has resonated with millions. I thought about the reporter's card still in my wallet. Not ready. The words came out clear and firm. She nodded. That's completely valid. If you ever change your mind, you'll know. A lawyer named Catherine Song reached out through Leo, saying she specialized in medical advocacy cases. She came to the house on a Tuesday evening with a briefcase and business cards and a direct manner I appreciated. Mr. Davis, I'll be honest with you. You have grounds for legal action, but I want to make sure you understand what that means before we proceed. She laid out the options, explained the process, talked about what we could prove and what would be difficult. The 911 recording is powerful evidence, but we'd need to establish that your wife's actions directly contributed to delayed treatment or worsened outcomes. Did they? I managed to ask. Catherine pulled out medical records she'd already obtained with my consent. The paramedics arrived 18 minutes after the 911 call. They assessed you immediately and transported you within 12 minutes. You were in surgery within 90 minutes of symptom onset. That's actually excellent time for stroke treatment. She paused. Where your wife's actions become legally questionable is in the consent delay. The hospital tried to reach her 7 times while you were in CT and prep. They ultimately proceeded under emergency physician consent, but that delay could have been critical in a different scenario. What about the 911 call itself? Could she face charges for providing false information? Catherine shook her head. Unfortunately, no. She believed what she was saying, even if that belief was based on years of dismissing your concerns. It's not illegal to be wrong or to have poor judgment in a crisis. What we can pursue is divorce with documentation of her behavior as evidence of breakdown in the marriage. We can also file complaints with professional organizations if she held any healthcare certifications. And the recording itself has created professional consequences she'll deal with for years. Every future employer will find it. I thought about Vanessa in our empty house, jobless and publicly shamed, facing a future where that 30-second recording would follow her forever. I thought about 6 years of marriage, where I'd been sober and supportive and slowly erasing myself to make room for her ambitions. I thought about lying on the kitchen floor unable to speak while she complained about her conference call. Let's proceed with divorce. My words were clear and steady. Catherine nodded and pulled out paperwork. We filed 3 weeks later. Vanessa contested it initially, sent angry emails about how I was abandoning her when she needed support, about how I was using my stroke to punish her for one mistake. Her lawyer tried to argue for reconciliation, sent letters about the sanctity of marriage and working through difficult times. Catherine responded with medical records documenting my care, with the 911 recording transcript, with statements from paramedics about Vanessa's behavior at the hospital. The case never went to trial. Vanessa agreed to mediation, where we divided assets and ended the marriage with mechanical efficiency. She kept the house because I didn't want it. I kept my retirement account and half the equity we'd built. We signed papers in a conference room with our lawyers present and barely looked at each other. 6 months after the stroke, I moved into a small apartment near Leo's house. Ruth had helped me regain about 80% function in my left side. I walked with only a slight limp now. My speech was back to normal, except when I was very tired. I'd returned to work at the warehouse part-time with accommodations. My boss, surprisingly supportive after reading about what happened. The fundraiser strangers had started covered my medical bills and left enough extra for me to build a safety net. I started attending a stroke survivors support group where people understood what it meant to have your body betray you, where no one questioned whether your symptoms were real. The recording never completely disappeared. It would surface periodically when people talked about medical gaslighting or emergency services or believing people in crisis. Each time it did, I'd get messages from strangers sharing their stories, thanking me for inadvertently bringing attention to something they'd experienced. I never responded publicly, but I read them all, let them know someone heard. Vanessa moved to another state according to Leo, who still kept tabs through mutual friends. She'd found work in a different field, using a nickname instead of her full name online, trying to build a life where that recording wasn't the first thing people found about her. I saw Kelly the paramedic at a coffee shop 9 months after the stroke. She was in civilian clothes, but I recognized her immediately. I walked over before I could second-guess myself. Kelly? She looked up from her phone and her eyes widened with recognition and something like pleasure. David! Oh my God, look at you. You're walking. You're talking. She stood up and we hugged briefly, the kind of hug you give someone who saw you at your worst and treated you with dignity anyway. How are you doing? Really, I'm okay. Still recovering, but so much better. The words came easily now, no slurring or searching. We sat and talked for 20 minutes about recovery and therapy and life after crisis. She told me she'd been following the story online, had been glad when she saw I was making progress. The recording changed things at work. We had mandatory training on patient advocacy and recognizing when family members are creating barriers to care. Your case became a teaching example, anonymized, but everyone knew. She paused. I hope that's okay. I nodded. If it helps other people, use it. She smiled, warm and genuine. You're doing really well. I'm proud of you, if that's not weird to say. It wasn't weird. It felt like exactly what I needed to hear. A year after the stroke, I was living independently, working full-time, attending my support group and therapy appointments religiously. The anniversary hit harder than I expected, bringing back flashes of the kitchen floor and the ambulance and the fear. But I also marked how far I'd come, how much function I'd regained, how much stronger I was than before in ways that had nothing to do with physical recovery. I'd learned to advocate for myself, to believe my own experience, to demand being taken seriously. The stroke had nearly killed me, but it had also broken open a marriage that was slowly suffocating me. Ruth invited me to speak at a PT conference about recovery from a patient perspective. I stood in front of 200 therapists and told them what helped and what didn't, what made me feel human and what made me feel like a problem. I talked about the importance of being believed, about how medical professionals can be advocates when family members fail. I didn't mention Vanessa by name, but everyone in that room had heard the recording and knew exactly what I meant. The questions afterward were thoughtful and specific. Therapists asking how to better support patients whose partners minimize their conditions. The reporter who'd given me her card finally got her interview on the 18-month mark. I agreed because enough time had passed, because I'd processed enough in therapy to talk about it without falling apart. We sat in her office and she recorded while I told the whole story, from the kitchen floor to the divorce, from the viral recording to the slow rebuilding. She asked if I had any message for people who'd followed my story. Believe people when they tell you something's wrong. Don't dismiss symptoms because they seem inconvenient or dramatic. And if you find yourself on a kitchen floor unable to speak, know that there are people who will take you seriously, who will fight for you, who will hold your hand in an ambulance when your partner won't. The interview aired during Stroke Awareness Month and prompted another wave of attention, but this time I was ready for it. I'd built a life I was proud of, a support system that worked, a future that felt possible. Vanessa sent an email after the interview aired, brief and formal. I saw your interview. I'm glad you're doing well. That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement of what she'd done, just a polite nothing that felt exactly right for how our marriage had ended. I deleted it without responding. Some things don't deserve more words than they've already taken. The recording will probably follow both of us forever, a permanent documentation of the worst morning of my life and her worst judgment. But I survived, and she has to live with it. And honestly, that feels like enough.